The evenings are drawing in, and there's a bitter chill in the air after the sun has set. Some might attribute this to the coming of winter, but no amount of pumpkin spiced latte seems to warm through it. The cold lingers, rouses, and stirs sepulchral. It's not the changing of the seasons, it's the thinning of the veil between the living and the dead. Halloween is upon us. Ahoy there, folks! I'm Captain Benzie, and today's video is something a little different. As Halloween rolls in, my usual tradition is to replay through Bloodborne, quite possibly my favourite game of all time. However, I stupidly left my PS5 in Zimbabwe, so I need something else to fill that eldritch void in my life. And that's where The Last Faith comes in. Sadly, the full game's not yet launched, but I have been sinking my fangs into the demo for a few days now, and it's definitely scratching that itch quite nicely. You see, I love Bloodborne for its gothic horror Victorian aesthetic, mixed with that Lovecraftian cosmic horror. This channel is normally about space games, sure, but the Nightmare of the Void Beyond the Stars? Absolutely, that's where my real passion lies. Now, The Last Faith is a side-scrolling Metroidvania with Bloodborne vibes. That much is made obvious by the game's marketing and its art style. You're dropped into a dark and cryptic world with barely a wits about you, and you set off to figure out what's going on. Now, immediately, the atmosphere is palpable. The pixel art aesthetic is just gorgeous, and it oozes style like blood from an open wound. The animations are smooth and crisp, and despite the dark and moody setting, they're clear and readable. On top of the visuals, the sound design is delightful too, mixing notable silence behind echoing footsteps and howling winds, in between moments of serene and sinister orchestral sweeps. It builds tension nicely as you explore this dark world around you. Monsters do of course lurk in every corner, and the demo covers a wide variety of different archetypes, from sickly humans and dogs to vampiric brutes and far more besides. I particularly love the little old ladies who are running around with what appear at first to be rolling pins attacking you, and the creepy little frog-like men that just, kind of makes my skin crawl, but in the best way possible. Now, the world starts off pretty narrow when you're exploring and wandering around, as you'll want to do in your typical Metroidvania. It's all about exploring the world around you, finding those dead ends, and then trying to figure out how to proceed forwards. Sometimes that's with new abilities, sometimes it's by beating bosses, sometimes it's just by getting a little bit clever with things. And there were moments during the demo when I did find myself rather stuck. It was only later that I realised you can actually jump and hang onto ledges, and that suddenly opened up a whole load more of the map for me. There are a few areas of the demo that are clearly cut off and you can't access due to not having the right abilities. There's a couple of bits and pieces, like for example a few locked doors, or this strange cube that was blocking my way that I couldn't find a way past, and there were a couple of instances where I could see these kind of hooks on the walls that clearly wanted some kind of grappling hook for me to attach onto and climb up. Now, I've played through the demo an awful lot at this point in time, and unless I'm missing something really cleverly hidden, I can't see a way through those, so I assume that is just part of the demo experience. Now, the world itself, the demo is actually pretty large. There's a lot to explore here, quite a few NPCs to meet, and a decent amount of story to get your teeth into. We're introduced fairly early on to a merchant who talks about how his daughter has been kidnapped by some kind of church, and how essentially he wants you to buy things from him because that'll make him feel better about the situation. You find a woman mourning for her husband who can't mourn properly because she doesn't have flowers, and again, I can't seem to find those in the demo, so I'm assuming that's sort of the start of a quest into the main game itself properly. And there is a gentleman who seems to be sort of some kind of inventor or collector. It's kind of hard to make out. Also found a girl trapped behind a window, which didn't at all seem sinister. You see, the world of The Last Faith appears to have been infected with some kind of vampirism. I don't want to really draw too many allusions to Bloodborne, but it seems there is some kind of scientific group doing research, although from the demo it's unclear as to whether that research is into curing this disease or into utilising this disease, and I suppose that is going to be an interesting part of the story to try and figure out. And what starts off as a fairly linear event with you just kind of walking around and seeing what you can find very quickly opens up with all of these different paths. There's a few weapons to unlock, some really cool spells. The weapons themselves have different attack modes, different combos that you can do with them, and they've got different charged attacks. There are 4 that I've found in the demo so far, my personal favourite of which absolutely has to be the Spinal Blade, because oh my goodness, it's just awesome. Although I do like the Castlevania-esque nod by giving us a whip early on as well, which is pretty sweet. There are spells as well that can be used that are very reminiscent actually of Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, where they're almost like some of the enemy abilities that you can use yourselves, like putting out a protective group of ice clusters in front of you, or like a purple spinning disc that travels in an arc. I didn't personally find much use for them, but I suppose again that's going to be a case of later in the game having a build that works through it. I mean, certainly when I first played Bloodborne, I went very much for your skill or strength build first on, and it was only on later playthroughs that I tried to do an arcane playthrough that focused majority on the spells, and wow, that really opened things up for me. So I imagine we'll see a bit more of that in The Last Faith, because certainly in the demo there are only 2 classes available for you to start with, the Bruiser, I think it was, and a sort of mage class as well. And I have played through both repeated times just to get a feel for things, but there's also a rogue and another class in there as well that I assume again will be there at full launch later this month. Now, honestly, the demo is long enough that when you're exploring it the first time, there's plenty to see and do, but it can be run quite quickly if you know where you're going and what to look for. Certainly, I've got routes that I can run now that are very quick and get me right to the end, and the boss at the end of this, oh boy, I absolutely adore it. I was originally going to do this video review as sort of a let's play version of this, but it took me about an hour to reach the boss the first time, and I thought that's probably a little bit long for this kind of video. And then the boss himself, oh my goodness. Now I'm playing with just keyboard. I don't actually own a controller. This definitely feels like the kind of game I would personally be more comfortable with a controller, but I did teach myself to use keyboard, had to rebind a few of the keys to get it just comfortable enough for me. So I am using a control method that I'm not particularly used to for this style of game, but that boss kicked my face in for a good solid 40 minutes before I finally got him down. And there was this beautiful moment when I was first doing this where, and obviously spoiler alerts here, if you do want to miss spoilers then I'd skip ahead about 10-20 seconds. But I finally, after maybe 5 or 6 attempts, got what I thought was the boss down and watched him die and explode in blood and gore across the screen, only for phase 2 to begin. And oh my goodness, I was literally screaming at that point. And again, about like 40 minutes later, finally got him down, and it was just that typical Souls-like feeling of utter triumph. This is just the demo, right? The game itself launches, I think, the 15th of November, if I've got that correct in my head. And I am so excited about this. Like, I know they did Bloodborne PSX a while ago, and that was a really cool, interesting little experiment and great fun to play through. But I'm a huge fan of the original Bloodborne experience. I love Castlevania, and I love, especially like Symphony of the Night, I love the Metroidvania style of genre. Like, Hollow Knight is one of my favourite games of all time, and I actually really enjoyed the fact that Bloodborne having that kind of interwoven level design where you go through an area only to find yourself back at a previous one, and that sort of thing. I love that sensation, and I can see a lot of that coming to play here in The Last Faith. So ultimately, is the demo worth checking out? Well, it's completely free on Steam. Download it, give it a go, and if you do enjoy it, then wishlist the game and probably consider grabbing it. And if enough of you enjoy me talking about this game, then absolutely, I'm going to be grabbing this on release anyway. There's no two ways about it. It is gorgeous. It is exactly the aesthetic of a game that I am looking for right now. I'll do some live streams of this where I'll sit with you folks and I'll talk about it and play through it and maybe do a full review and some little guides and that on it. I know it's not the traditional kind of content for my channel, but you know what? It talks about like some of the spells being like knowledge from beyond the stars and stuff, so it's technically space related, I guess. We can go with that. I'm going with that. I'm totally going with that. Anyway, do let me know what you think about this one. I know a lot of you are not going to be particularly interested in this, but it's the kind of thing I think would work as a way of me to get set up live streaming and get into the habit of live streaming, be a bit more comfortable with how that will work. So if you think it's something you might enjoy watching, absolutely, let me know in the comment section down below. Otherwise, folks, happy sailing, and I'll see you all next time. Happy Halloween.